He wanted to be a new Peter the Great, but became Adolf II. The Russian invasion of Ukraine on February 24th was originally aimed at fighting with fascism, and although the Kremlin has changed the official target of its barbaric attack several times since then, Russian propagandists regularly mention fascism.
Обратите внимание, мирные люди. Россия идет вас освобождать от нацистов.
However, as psychologists say, if you have problems, look for their sources inside yourself. This is the definition of fascism that can be found on Wikipedia. History shows that this political movement originated in Italy during the First World War under Benito Mussolini, and it was the Italians who later described it thoroughly. The famous Italian writer and philosopher Umberto Eco identified features of this man-hating ideology. He published them in his work Eternal Fascism, and it seems that the Russians use this book as a guide. The first characteristic of eternal fascism is the cult of traditions. In Russia, they call it a high spirituality and moral values. Any contact with civilization violates this ideal. After all, it is believed that the population of other countries is too mercantile, incompetent, and not spiritual. The second point at the list is a direct consequence of the first, rejection of modernism. Irrationalism is present in every aspect of the Russian life. They enjoy almost all the benefits of civilization, but they are not trying hard to create their own. They use imported goods and criticize them at the same time. And the fascination with technology is generally called the corruption of young people.
Вот наш ответ на санкции американцам.
A cult of action for the sake of action, distrust of everything intellectual. This is a banal refusing to think about actions. It concerns both the army and the civil population. The party, the leader or the king have been thinking instead of them for decades or even centuries. At the same time, criticizing any decision from above is strictly prohibited. Doubts are equated with betrayal. This is the next point in the list of Umberto Eco. The Kremlin regime went so perfect in the call of action that even people with blank banners on the streets are being immediately arrested. The very fact of dissatisfaction and protest is prohibited by the state. Everyone must think the same, act the same, and be the same.
Сидя на своих местах, я боюсь, враг слишком быстро справится с вами. Только стоя, уверенно на двух ногах, с поднятой головой можно славить свою родину.
The fear of diversity explains the racism in fascist ideology. It is hardly possible to find even a nationality that the Russians did not invent an offensive term. Meanwhile, inside this huge multinational state live Hach, Turks, Bash, Darkies, etc. Among those who take part in the war against Ukraine are Buryats, Kadyrov mercenaries, Dagestanis, but there are almost no residents of large cities among them. Light-skinned Russians from big cities are the Russian middle class. Typically, they swallow everything that propaganda tells them or leave the country in silence. The resistance of the middle class in Russia has been suppressed a long time ago and is impossible. Even nationalism is nurtured through conspiracy theories. For Russia, these conspiracies are mostly international in nature, and the enemies literally surround peaceful and civilized, light-skinned, real Russians. According to the ruling elite, the population should always be afraid that they may be captured by the Americans, and the European community only seeks to seize all the riches of endless Russia.
Выбор этот, который мы делаем сейчас, но сделали уже по сути, облегчается тем, что коллективный Запад нам объявил тотальную гибридную войну. И трудно прогнозировать, сколько все это продлится, но ясно, что последствия почувствуют все без исключения.
At the same time, according to Umberto Eco's checklist, the Western threat is portrayed as a powerful NATO and the United States. At the same time, the Russians present any actions of their own as a triumph, reporting on thousands of downed Bayraktars and the capture of large cities.
А зачем нам такой мир, если там не будет России?
The Russians are already accustomed to constant fighting with someone, and calls for peace are forbidden. That is why they were surprised when, for the first time in 30 years, they finally received a consolidated rebuff from the West. At the same time, the constant war is demonstrated as the main reason for the poor life of ordinary Russians, due to the fact that significant resources are spent on protection from endless enemies.
Просто денег нет. Значит, найдем деньги, сделаем индексацию. Вы держите здесь, вам всего доброго, хорошего настроения и здоровья.
And it's impossible to abandon the war with such an ideology, because in that case Russia will simply cease to exist. They will no longer have anything to believe in. The cult of heroism and the cult of death mentioned in the checklist are the weakest. There are no places to raise heroes, and they are so used to death and violence even in everyday life that it's not a cult, but a real everyday life. The only certified hero is the leader. No wonder the power vertical in Russia is maintained thanks to a strong, at least officially, leader. Not wise or tolerant or even progressive, but strong. And the ideology of power is passed down to every citizen. Attack the weak, obey the stronger.
Вот скажи мне, американец, в чем сила?
It also creates a cult of machismo and sexism. Violence, along with sexual violence, thrives in homes, on the streets, at work, and even in children's institutions or churches. The principle is the same. Attack the weak, obey the stronger. At the heart of Russian machismo is their proverb «beats means loves».
Ну, нравится, не нравится, терпи, моя красавица. Надо исполнять.
The last item in the Umberto Eco's list explains the need of fascist ideology to create a new form of language. In this view, all Nazi or fascist school textbooks use depleted vocabulary to limit critical thinking. This is not only education, but also language where swearing prevails, which Russians are very proud of.
Дорогие приписчики, которые вы любите, которую, блядь, вам Сан Саныч говорит.
Russian television mostly broadcasts aggression and contempt, and as for the symbols of the war that they brought to Ukraine, the letters Z, O and V, no one knows their meaning, but they were easily picked up by millions. What the world does not understand and what the majority of Ukrainians still cannot get, modern Russians cannot be measured by modern ethical or moral norms. Power, violence, the desire to obey the kings, all this is inherited for centuries. And even when Putin will leave his post, the established notions of life have nowhere to go.